Now, what we do with the panel is, what we want to do is, again, the inspiration on the stage today is unbelievable. But we want to make sure that we balance that with the realities of the challenges that you're facing in your job in Canada. And so we have some amazing panelists with us here today who are going to help us with that perspective. Now, I will say one thing before I introduce them. My goal is to get great conversation, and sometimes how I do that is to play devil's advocate. So a lot of the times when I'm asking pointed questions, I actually agree with the speaker. So if you're like, oh my God, this guy's totally sexist right now, I'm probably not. I'm really just trying to generate great conversation, okay? Are we all agree with that? Okay, good. Okay, so please welcome our first panelist. She's a partner at PwC, Jennifer Johnson. Jennifer, come on out. Welcome, welcome. You had some woos out there. Are there PwC woos?
There are.
Oh, you need better seats next time. I think. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. Those are great. Those are perfect seats, actually. So Jennifer, what role do you play in your partner, but in what area of PwC?
So I help to run what we call our risk assurance and advisory practice.
I do not know what that means.
It's all about risk management, whether it's technology, process, fraud, cyber is a big one these days.
Yep.
By helping clients understand those risks and how they can manage them better.
That's awesome. And is there a specific sector that you focus on?
Yep. So I lead our financial services industry across the country, but most of my clients are in the insurance sector.
The very exciting sector of insurance.
It is.
It is. Yeah. I remember Will Ferrell accepting an award, and he said, "I didn't want to be a comedian. I really wanted a career in insurance." No, that's fantastic, and certainly in that in that sector, risk is massively important. It's massively important.
Significant component.
Yeah, it's a significant importance. Well, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is the Vice President of Personal and Indirect Lending from TD. Please welcome Katy Boshart. Katy? I feel like this is American Idol and there are different... We know who you're voting for. Where are the TD folks? Say it, give them a big hello. Senior management, middle management. That's how that works. They were rowdier than you people. Katy, how long have you been at TD?
I've been at TD for 6 years now.
For 6 years?
Yes.
But you've got experience in Canada and the US, correct?
I do. I moved to Canada in 2010. Prior experience was down in the East Coast in the States, a couple of top 10 banks down there.
Awesome. And are you enjoying the Canadian experience?
So much so that I describe myself as an American transplanted to Canada by choice. And we got our permanent residency last summer.
That's
We're staying.
awesome. We appreciate your tax dollars in funding our education and healthcare system. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Next panelist, the Managing Director for eBay Canada, Andrea Stairs. You know what just happened there, right? They're like, okay, when he introduces Andrea, like really yell. eBay, where are you? Very nice. But only do it once, okay? Just. And Andrea, how long have you been at eBay?
I've been at eBay for 9.5 years.
That's awesome.
I joined thinking I was going to be there for 6 months. So 9 years for 6 months.
Yeah, that's very good. Now, a lot of people here probably think they know what eBay does, but that business has changed massively.
Yeah.
Can you explain where eBay is right now and where it's heading?
So we just celebrated our 15th birthday in Canada about a month ago. And since we launched, I mean, everybody knows eBay as an auction platform, used inventory, but now 80% of what we sell on the site is new, and 80% of what we sell is at fixed price, and we're the #2 e-commerce site in the country. Canadians spend more than $1 billion on eBay every 12 months.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. And we sell, playing to my crowd, we sell 1 million items a month on eBay.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And has that increased as more, like the maker industries and things has grown? Are people kind of using it as their e-commerce platform?
Yeah, I mean, we see a range from people like you and I doing, we call them C2C sellers, so consumer to consumer, selling stuff out of our closet, what have you, all the way up to big box retailers, so Lowe's Canada, Toys R Us, and then, but the bulk of our sellers are in the small, medium business range, and they may be doing stuff from home, they may be, maybe a retail store that their online presence is on eBay. There's a whole bunch of different models, but yeah, thousands and thousands of Canadians are selling actively on eBay.
Yeah, that's awesome. Welcome.
Thanks.
And our final panelist is the Chief People Officer for Tangerine. Please welcome Cheryl Stargratt. Cheryl, come on up. Well, it's the other way, I guess. Well, hello, Tangerine. That's the power of orange right there. Cheryl, now Tangerine, as everybody knows, went through a change that is never easy, but was quite exciting, certainly, for everyone.
Yep.
How did you, because I had done some work with Tangerine, I knew there's just an incredible culture there. How did you manage that transition? I know it's like a 30-second answer, or it's a 3-hour answer, but
Yeah.
Can you summarize how you transitioned the people of ING Direct into Tangerine?
Sure. Well, I've only been with Tangerine for 96 days, so
So you did nothing.
I did nothing. They did it all. But in all honesty, I think the real key was engaging the employees at all levels and really listening to the voice, all the way from asking about things with regard to BNS, what name we would call ourselves, and it was really just mobilizing the masses and feeling and experiencing the orange culture.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, welcome all of you. The first thing I wanted to ask, and this is a bit leading, I guess, and a bit devil's advocate-ish, but do we need this day? Why are we having an Art of Leadership for women? There's an Art of Leadership. Y'all can buy tickets to that. Katy, why do we need this day?
Well, I think, fundamentally, women operate differently from men. And my belief is that difference does not mean better or worse. But because we operate differently, I think we need to understand how we operate differently and how we can be successful in our careers with our own ways. And so there's value for sure in bringing women together for a day or on a longer term basis and just focusing on kind of the women's focus.
Yeah. Cheryl, you agree?
I think my question is why do we need the Art of Leadership? I think, I think what we learn, the principles, the guidelines, I think they're very transferable between the genders. I do think, though, that we have different conversations. And I think when we share those conversations with each other, I think it furthers our cause with having more women in leadership roles and understanding.
Yeah, I was just thinking back a few months ago, I was on a panel similar to this within PwC and had an opportunity to speak with some of the most senior women in our firm. And it was really insightful and helpful to me as I think about where I am in my career versus where I might want to go, and hearing some of the stories that I could really relate to around some of those more senior females in our partnership and some of the struggles and the challenges they've been through, some things I could really relate to and take away some tips and learnings that I could carry forward as I move ahead, and hopefully can share some of those today. But I think those conversations are extremely valuable to all of us.
Yeah. Would you agree, audience? Yeah, awesome. Now, I guess if on one end of the spectrum there's no women in the workforce from the, I was going to say 1700s, but like 1960s, it's horrible. If that's at one end of the spectrum and complete and utter transparency and absolute gender equality is on the other end of the spectrum, where are we? How close are we to getting to the point that everybody in this room goes, you know what, we're good? How far do we have to go, Andrea?
So we're at the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end. We're not there, and we're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
You look at board representation and senior executive representation. eBay is a leader among Silicon Valley companies, but we only have 28% of women at director and above. And I think we're stuck. So I think we need to have things like this. I think we need to focus on things that we can actually do that will move the dial, and whether it's having comply or explain rules for boards, whether it's sort of practical things like sponsorship, what have you. We're nowhere near the end goal, and so we need to continue to focus on this. I think the good news is the men that we work with are now part of the solution, and are, for the most part, are engaged in this conversation. And so some of those early battles about why are we even having this conversation, and is it like, why are you bothering me with this problem?
Right.
We're over that, I think, but we still have a long way to go to get to where we need to be, particularly given the ratios of women graduating from professional schools and from universities, et cetera.
Yeah. Katy, you're having the conversation. Would you agree the conversation is being had?
Yeah, I was going to point out, though, we've made a ton of progress in this front. And I know at TD we have a really strong women in leadership organization that's head up by our CFO. And some of the metrics that come out of that, 10 years ago, we were at 25% women representation at senior leaders, so vice president and above. And now we're up in the mid-30s. And so I think it's significant progress that we've made. But even with mid-30s, it doesn't feel like it's representative enough. And so I think part of it, we've been focusing on what is the conversation that we need to have so that women up and down the organization aspire to, want to, feel like they have the support to move in their careers and don't do what we've been talking about, the opting out of more senior positions.
Right.
I agree, but I think we're stuck. We're stuck, and we're starting to flatline a little bit. I think we made a lot of progress initially, but when we're 50% of the population, and you don't see that in the rank and file, and the opportunities aren't equal for us, and if we continue to, apply the models of the past and thinking that something different is going to happen for us in the future, I just think that we're naive. And I think that organizations and all of us, and male and female leaders, have a strong role to play in this. I think, I do agree that organizations now have more visibility, there's more passion on it, but I still think that we have a long way to go.
Yeah. The consumer mindset, the consumer behavior patterns, consumer journeys, all those. There's been a lot of shifts in that, and maybe because I'm an ad guy that I kind of see that. But more and more, it looks like those organizations who are succeeding, though both internally and externally, it's the skills that have been brought to the table traditionally by female leaders are what everybody is saying we have to be like in organizations, right? So is the market primed for an organization led by females? Do we think that the external world is kind of where consumers are saying we want this and we just have to catch up to that? Or is that just way too complex? You're looking at me, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I think it's complex, Ron. I think that, 21st century leadership skills tended to be deemed perhaps more female-like. Cooperation, collaboration, sharing. So do all leaders need to have more of that in the 21st century? Absolutely. Do we maybe have an advantage because it tended to be more female-like? Sure we do. I think that also the organizations have a role to play. When most mentors are older males and we don't see a connection or that tribe of women mentors for us. I mean, we know that statistics show that women that have mentors or champions get further. Yeah. Because they advocate for us, they promote us, they encourage us. So I think it's a combination of those things that really organizations need to look at so we can drive this forward.
So if we know that, how do we do it? If we know that women who have female mentors do better within organizations, how do we operationalize that? Do you have a mentorship program?
We do. We have a Women in Leadership program at PwC. I think we spent a lot of time over the last few years really enhancing that program, identifying those really high-performing, long-term potential females that we want to make sure that are feeling heard, valued, and that they really do have a long-term career opportunity with us. And that includes thinking about things like, do you have a sponsor? Should you have a sponsor? Do you need a sponsor? What does that really involve? Do you have mentors, champions, and coaches? We've established lean-in circles as well. And so, I think we're trying to really empower our up-and-coming females to really feel like they've got the support around them and they have different outlets to go to and to share their challenges as well as their successes and lean on us to draw from our experiences to hopefully better themselves for the future.
Andrea?
I'm going to say two things. I think the first is that it's really important to create the distinction between mentorship and sponsorship. And I think that, even I didn't really understand it and have kind of appreciated it more in the last sort of 5 years. Sponsorship is really about a very explicit conversation about, this is where I want to go. Can you help me? What do I need to do? What kind of information, behavior, success, whatever do I need to give you in order for you to invest your equity on my behalf in whatever decision you're taking part in? That's very different, and I think that is something that that people at the mid-level of their career, you have to kind of gird yourself up to have that conversation. Yeah. The amazing thing is that once you start having that conversation, you realize that everybody on the other side of the table has had similar conversations themselves in their career and are very open to it. But I think we need to sort of challenge ourselves. Is the person that we're dealing with a mentor, which is great, and mentors have their place, or is it a sponsor? And if it's really a sponsor, am I behaving as a sponsor-sponsee relationship should be? Right. I think the other thing is that we can do a lot in organizations to create a fertile soil for this, but fundamentally, it is up to us as individuals to take the reins of our careers. And I think that is so important that, it's men, women, it's up to us. No one else is looking out, is going to be better than you at championing you in whatever career it is.
Yeah.
I think I'd call out that, men spent a lot of time in the past working on those networks and those sponsorships and those mentorships as part of their natural interactions. And I think what you're starting to see over the past, call it 15, 20 years, is a women's circle of sharing that information and having the dialogue around, it's more than just being nice to people. It's more than just your relationships. It's, do you know the business? It's how good are you at selling yourself and what you bring, the value add that you bring to the next role, and building up women's confidence early in their careers so they're not afraid to aspire to whatever that next level is. And I think, for me, it's a responsibility of mine as a woman in a senior leadership position to provide that access for other women, and also potentially the inspiration for some junior women who are coming in new in their career to figure out, oh, I can actually do that and have, in my case, I have 4 kids and a very busy life outside of work. And so how do I do that? Well, it's craziness.
Yeah.
It's managed chaos on a daily basis, but I do it. And so what are the different ways that you can kind of aspire to, I don't have to give everything else up in order to be a senior leader in an organization. And I think that's some of the transparency and dialogue that I think we need to continue to have to provide options for women to consider.
It's funny, as a guy, you'll have no idea the pressure a guy faces early in their career, because someone told me, you want to get ahead, learn how to play golf. I was like, I guess I'm going to be a failure at that, because I hate golf. But that, it's that weird, informal, male networking, mentoring thing that happens on a golf course. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. So I'm going to come join your circle and do that. Now, you mentioned, sorry, did you have a comment? I didn't want to cut you off.
I was just thinking about, when you're talking about sponsorship, I mean, I think even for myself, even the last 2 years, that concept has really just come to light for me. I really never focused on it throughout my years growing up within the firm, and just being a mentor and a champion within supporting younger professional females in our firm, really talking about the concept of sponsorship made me pause and reflect and think about the individuals, both male and female, that have been sponsors for me over the last 16, 17 years at the firm, and really grateful that I had them, but also thinking about how I want to use those relationships going forward, and then how I want to, again, return it back and be a sponsor to others. But it really caused me just to pause and reflect on what I've gained, but also what I can give back.
But what about the women in the audience who, because you all work for somewhat large global organizations, right? So where there are programs, there are structures, whether it's a mentorship program, what if I'm an entrepreneur and I've started my own thing, or I work at a company of 5 people?
Yeah, but I work at a company that I'm the senior most person in Canada. So it's not like I got people sort of rolling around my office that, so I have to go to San Jose and have these conversations, which is where our head office is, and have these conversations with a far less kind of social capital as a basis, right? Because I'm not bumping into these people in the hallway all the time. So it's an extra step. I think for entrepreneurs, it's about, there's a community of entrepreneurs. It's about finding people, whether it's, people in the funding sources for those entrepreneurs, the VC community, the angel investors, what have you, whether it's peers who, if you're in a client service, strong clients that you can sort of use them to sponsor you to other clients. Like, there are ways of doing this, but I think, to your point, it takes active thought and it takes ongoing maintenance. This is not something you do once and then check that box.
Right.
Like, I'm in a moment now when two of my sponsors internally at eBay have left the company. So I've got to go back and sort of start collecting more because they're not, that's great, they're friends, it's awesome, but they're not in the conversations anymore, and that's where I need them to be.
Yeah. Andrew stares. She looks at it like, you can't do anything for me anymore, you're dead to me. No, I'm kidding. We're friends, it's okay. We're totally friends, it's okay. But that is a reality. I think that is some great insight for entrepreneurs or people working within smaller organizations. It doesn't have to be within your organization. Now, each of you has mentioned kind of, the younger women within your organization. Are younger women facing different, how are the challenges different for women starting their career now than when they were when each of you started your career? Are they that different?
We're not that old, Ron.
Younger.
Did you ever own Michael Jackson Thriller?
No.
No.
Who is that?
I had said it last week. I showed a sign of a picture of Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, a picture of Carlton, that actor, on the town sign of Carlton. And I saw someone young in the audience, and she looked, early 20s, and I said, you probably don't know who this is, you're too young for this reference. And she goes, it's the guy from Dancing with the Stars, I'm not an idiot. But even in the 2 years since you started your career.
Started being a leader?
And I'm just curious, are the challenges any different or no? They're dealing with the same shit that you guys dealt with.
It's the same shit, a different year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's the same. I do. I think we're in different stages of our career now, but when I sit down and I talk with young women that are coming into business and some of the challenges, being in a first-time leadership role, when you look around the room and maybe 20% are female, they're dealing with the same issues that we dealt with. Looking for, maybe a mentor or a champion. There are more females now, I think, but still not, it's not plentiful. I think they still have the same challenges that we had when you're first starting, perhaps in a relationship or your family and how you're going to juggle it. They're the same issues that we had. We might just have a little bit more, experience or a few more scars to show about the right choices and the wrong choices that we made.
I think it comes back to this, the plateauing. I grew up with a single mom who was an executive at a bank, and she was an executive at a bank in the 80s. What she went through is very different than what I'm going through, have gone through, and what the younger women in my office are going through. But I don't think that in the last sort of 10 to 15 years things have changed that dramatically. I think we kind of got to a 20%, 30% female leadership, and we're kind of stuck there. And I don't actually think we're seeing a lot of difference.
The only thing I would say on top of that is I do think that over time, and even over maybe that last 15 or so years, the biases are getting a little bit more subtle and a little less overt, at least in my own experience. So earlier on in my career, did have a few more overt, comments that came about, sexist type comments. Yeah. But now I find that the biases are much more subtle. Certainly no one wants to be perceived to be sexist or to carry these stereotypes with them, but they still exist, and I think they're just a little bit more under the cover.
Yeah,
right. So that makes them harder to detect and harder to really manage in some cases.
Yeah. Yep. I think the more overt biases might be reduced, I agree. I think the hidden biases are still very much in the system, right? I think when you look at promotion rates or opportunities or equity in pay and those types of things, I think the old systems of yesterday still have those biases in them. And I think until, organizations are proactive and approach them with, fervor and really look for them, they're not just going to disappear for us.
Yep. Now, a couple of speakers have or will throughout the day talk, and I've just kind of, the little things that diminish your leadership potential, that we, whether it's the inner critic that I think Tara spoke about this morning. Oh, you're not buying that? Okay, all right.
We're going to chat about that.
We already talked about that.
Yeah, but are there things that you catch yourself that you have to be a little bit more conscious of? That there's some stuff that maybe happens automatically, but that you have to, consciously and strategically make different decisions.
So yeah, but I think that is the shift between becoming a manager to becoming a leader. Like I think everybody needs to do that. I think men becoming new leaders have to also think about their behaviors and catching themselves. And it was interesting, this first speaker this morning talking about how focusing on external goals and sort of the bigger picture can help you kind of get out of some of the negative impacts of stress. I think it can also help a new leader sort of stop focusing on their own behaviors and sort of and make that transition more easily. Yeah. But I think that we all, when you transition to a leadership role, there's this kind of myth that you get the job title and suddenly you're a leader and it's all supposed to sort of magically fall into place, and it doesn't. And the thing that I'm learning is that, as I go, and talk to my leadership that I report into, or senior leaders in the company, they're all working on it too. And so, I'm sort of in the process of I'm getting a coach, and I'm realizing that everybody above me all has coaches already. I'm like, can we not talk about this? It would have been really helpful to know that, as opposed to me thinking I'm like breaking new ground and kind of out there on my own. Yeah. So I think there's lots of stuff that, to become a leader it's a lot of work. There's a lot of development. It's not something that magically happens, and both men and women need to focus on it, and there are real skills.
We were talking about this, we laugh because we were talking about this point before we came out here. And, for me, I think there's also sometimes a tendency to see yourself maybe as you once were versus the person that you've evolved to now, right? And so I've paused and reflected upon that quite a bit lately. And so there are times where I find myself as a relatively new partner at PwC in the room with some very senior partners, leadership of the Canadian firm and globally. And maybe I have an idea, and I think that idea is really powerful and something we really need to implement. But I'll pause internally and almost second guess myself, right? To say, is this really a good idea? Clearly somebody else already thought about this probably 10, 20 minutes ago, and I'm the one trying to catch up. And so there's a little bit of a pause and kicking myself internally to say, no, this is probably a really good idea. You need to just say it, get it out there, and what's the worst that's going to happen? So they say, oh, yeah, Jen, we thought about that already, and we thought this, and that, and we've kind of gone in this other direction. Okay, that's great. But at least I'm a part of the conversation, and I'm showing that I'm thinking strategically, thinking long term, versus holding it inside, and eventually someone else has that idea, puts it out there, and oh, yeah, it's a great idea. And I'm sitting there going, oh, seriously?
That was mine. It's totally mine. Yeah.
Well, to that point, I was going to say, I think part of it is being comfortable taking risk. And I don't know if I go as far as to say it's a gender thing, but I would say that I'd seen quite a tendency on women that I mentor with, where they're afraid to go too far outside their comfort zone, or they want to be perfect, or they want to just have the right answer all the time. And I think we would need to be okay with taking calculated risks, understanding the risk that you are taking so that you can push yourself, but being okay with failure every once in a while. And that's what I think some men are more comfortable doing on a regular basis. And as leaders, you have to be okay putting yourself out there. To your point, Jen, on doubting yourself about putting your idea out there because it might not be a new idea, but we have to be comfortable doing that as leaders.
Yeah. What is the one thing that leaders of organizations, regardless of their gender, can do to improve the situation within their organizations? What's the most important thing we have to do? How do we get out of this flatlining period, this leveling off period?
I think if you're in a position to mentor, you should be mentoring people and championing and advocating. I think as female leaders, we need to do the same thing. I think that it's incumbent upon leaders to challenge the system. I think, again, I'll go back to, the old way of doing things or the models that were mostly built on a male model of work, those days are over. I think if we, don't expect women to be able to have families, to have more than just work, I think we're fooling ourselves. So when you're looking at your policies, your practices, they need to be revisited, and I think some of the old assumptions need to be challenged. I think that goes for men as well, though. I mean, I think the work and life, how they integrate and where we are today is very different. And I think organizations and individuals and leaders need to really stand up and challenge those things. I think putting yourself out there. Oftentimes we think that we might be the only women that are experiencing some things, and then you find out, no, we all experienced it. We have to have that voice. And I think then it'll start to push the organizations to do differently.
Yeah.
I think when you also you look at the way you manage the business itself, things that you measure, things that you report on regularly, things that are transparent, things that you goal people on and incent them on, change. I think it's great to have the targets around boards and to have a comply or explain. Let's use what we know about managing change or creating change in other places to create change here. There's been a lot of pressure in Silicon Valley to report out on female and diversity and how companies are doing integrating those groups into companies, not only just at an overall level, but in terms of technical functions and technology functions and then leadership. And I think the more that we create pressure around communication and measurement, I think that is a huge lever that we should be using.
Right.
And the transparency of it. I think the transparency is a big piece of it too. If you look over to Europe and some of the countries over there where they've got 40% women on boards and 40%, it's mandated. They have to do it.
Right.
So what you said is absolutely correct. What gets measured gets done.
Yeah. Did you have a comment? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that, it was in a conversation even just yesterday, and I think it's about continuing the dialogue, keeping it front and center and not getting complacent about it. But I was in a conversation yesterday talking about some of the folks that may become a partner in our firm in the next few years, and there was an individual who's on that track, but the comment that came back to me was, well, she doesn't seem like she wants it. And I said, well, why is that? Well, because she hasn't asked for it outright. And I said, but did we ask her? Have we had a conversation with her? And it was, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, well, maybe that's what we need to do, because maybe that's just not who she is to go out and say, I want this, and to be very explicit about it. But if we're mentoring her, we're coaching her, and we're providing that support, why don't we initiate the dialogue with her? And so I think really it is about keeping that dialogue front and center.
Yeah. Is there a, one could say, one probably should say that a massive amount of inequality still exists on the home side of things as well. And does that play a role? I mean, I certainly hope not in my case, but my wife is here somewhere. She's probably going, oh no. One, how important are the changes to be made on the personal side of people's lives? And two, that question would never come up in a male panel, and that's kind of disgusting that it wouldn't, right? No man would ever kind of feel compelled to talk about how they have to balance anything in their personal life, which is weird. But is that a question that should be asked? In terms of full equality across the entire spectrum of organizationally and personally?
So you've hit on one of my pet peeves, which is when I sit on panels with peers of mine who are male, no one ever asks them how many kids they have. But it always comes up that I have 4 children, because that's like an enormous amount of children, I guess. And because I have a clan or a tribe or whatever you want to call it, it seems to be a topic of dialogue. But it's true, we don't ask men the same question. And for me, we need to redirect the conversation to what's a more valid question to ask, which is not how do you balance family work life. For me, if I can go on a bit of a tangent, balance, if you think about a scale, it's always moving. Right? And it's never static, and you're going to figure out, at times it's going to weigh one side versus the other, and you're going to work through kind of the ebbs and flows of life as you figure out what is the balance for you and your partner at home, and how are you going to manage all of that, and who's going to make the decisions. And you have to get to a place where you're going to be comfortable that perhaps your house is going to be filthy half the time. Or you're going to shell out the money for a cleaning lady, which is something I broke down and did a couple years ago. So I think that you figure out how do you work that through on your own personal terms and what those issues are. I think just like in the workforce, we need to be explicit about our wants, our aspirations, what we need to be successful. We have to do the same thing at home. And if you're not having that, frank, transparent dialogue with your partner saying, how come I am always doing the laundry?
Yeah.
Where's the balance here? How are we going to work that through? That's just something that you need to work on yourself personally.
I think you're right. I think the conversation is really about, it's not about family and having kids, it's about balance, and what balance means to you is going to evolve in your life, in your career, and it is constantly shifting. As someone with young kids at home, I want to make sure that I have the time for my career, time for my family, but also time for me as an individual, which was something that I wasn't doing right when my twin daughters were first born, and really got some great advice from my mentor at the firm to say, Jen, you need to stop. Think about this, be very cognizant about it, otherwise, you'll come back to regret that at some point. But it is not about the fact of, do you have 4 kids, do I have twins at home, et cetera, et cetera. It's about what does balance mean to you, and how are you going to implement some tools in your life such that you can maintain that on par, knowing that some days are going to be a little bit better than others.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with both of you, but I think it's the next male panel. I want to do it, right? I want to go, geez,
How
Ted,
many kids do you have?
how many children do you have?
How do you do it all?
And Ted's going to go, I don't know. I don't know. Right? Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation.
It's a whole other thing. Ted, how do you balance? How do you do it all? What do you mean? I think it's incredibly unfair that we don't ask that question of men, and until we do, I don't. I mean, we have to get over that uncomfortable. We ask the question, and maybe it will make men stop and think maybe I should be thinking more about how I balance things at home and how that affects my career. Was that a good enough response for everyone? Yes. All right. I'm totally playing to the crowd here.
But can I just say one thing? One
Yeah.
thing I do like about the question coming up is because sometimes when you're sitting with male colleagues and they're calling 7 a.m. meetings or they're calling 8 o'clock, sometimes giving a little bit insight into the world that we live is not necessarily a bad thing. So I think sometimes being able to see into the worlds of the colleagues that they have around the table that happen to be women that might be dealing with some of those issues where you're balancing this, you're balancing that, it's kind of going out of balance, you're in chaos. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that we show our true self to them either.
Right. What are you most excited about? We'll just finish up on that, and then we'll come into so prepare your questions. But what are you most excited about over the next year?
I think, geez.
And anything, could be anything.
I guess a lot of things for me. I really love spending my time coaching and mentoring people. Not just necessarily our up-and-coming females within the firm, but all of our staff.
Yep.
I take a lot of pride in that, and the opportunity to do that as part of our Women in Leadership program, as part of the diversity and inclusion initiatives that I help to lead. That really gives me a lot of satisfaction and a feeling of accomplishment. And then trying to bring that, thinking about balance. I strive really hard to have what I think is a good balance right now, and I have a very supportive partner at home, but making sure that I'm also being supportive in return and not always supported. So I think that's something that I want to make sure that I'm doing and I want to focus on as I think about the coming year.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of something clever to say about what I'm excited about. I don't know, the U.S. election is coming up, so that ought to be entertaining.
Go Hillary!
Went to school with Hillary. No.
Really?
She's a few years ahead of me, yeah.
Okay.
Same school. No, I think this is a really exciting time to be part of kind of corporate America, and I think there's a ton of opportunity for women when you think about how far we have to go and what we've been talking about. I think it's a good time to be a woman with aspirations and very few barriers in front of us. I think we need to start standing up and asking for the roles, and so that's what gets me excited for the next foreseeable future.
Awesome. Andrea?
For me, I'm super excited about what I'm doing right now. The work that we're doing at eBay is really fun. So that is great. I'm really excited about my team. I'm really excited about helping them, and both men and women. I think we are in exciting times. I see lots of opportunity, and I'm excited by concrete action happening. So I'm a big proponent in, in leaning into what you can do and controlling your destiny. And so whether it's focusing on sponsorship, whether it's focusing on data coming out, and what Catalyst is publishing, and the new thresholds for boards of directors. Like, I think all of that is really good. I think the data and the sort of the more concrete and the less hand-wringing, the sky's falling, what are we going to do? And now, like, a transition to concrete action is what gets me excited.
Awesome. Cheryl?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited. Like I mentioned, I've just newly joined Tangerine, so I like to think of myself as a collective relationship. So there's just like all these people that I'm about to make relationships with. I'm really excited about that. I think we have a lot of great challenges ahead of ourselves, and some transformative, complex ideas that we're playing with, and that's very stimulating. And I think just being a mom, I'm excited. My daughter's a teenager now, so she's at she's at that age. I'm excited about it. I am. No. And I think we're at a really good time as women, and we can really do a lot. And that excites me to just be around women like we are today, and all of the women here. I think it's very inspiring, and gives me a lot of passion to do my best to contribute.
That's awesome. Thank you. Can I borrow your mic, and then if you could share, I'll come out. Just put your hand up so I know how to navigate the audience. Is there anybody on this side? Yes, right there. She's like, I'm standing in the aisle so I can get my question.
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. That was really great. I really didn't know what to expect when it started. But my question was, it's kind of two parts. First of all, how important do you think it is to kind of bring in the language of feminist discourse when creating these conversations and initiating them? And secondly, whether or not being a feminist is still considered, whether calling oneself a feminist is still considered a dirty word.
I'll take that. First of all, I went to a women's college, so I feel pretty passionate about the language that we choose to use makes a difference in how people perceive it. One of the things I've been doing over the past year or so is choosing the female pronouns when I'm speaking about leaders in the organization, and I'm still surprised by how often it gives people pause when I say, and when you speak with this senior vice president and she says. And so I think we need to do more deliberate discourse that way to encourage people to be thinking about the modeling of women in senior leadership roles through the language we choose to use.
There were two parts to that question, right? Did you get?
Just whether or not, like, being a feminist. And the second part was whether or not being a feminist is going to be, or identifying yourself as a feminist is going to be to your disadvantage when kind of pursuing leadership roles and positions like that.
Ooh, looks like no one wants to take that one.
No, I don't think.
I don't think it is.
No.
I don't think it is
I don't
either.
think it is.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anybody else up in here? Okay, well, can you pass that?
Thank you. I recently heard that the salary difference or discrepancy between men and women are up to 30–50% sometimes, even for the same role. And I was a little frustrated, to hear this news. And what can we do to make sure that women are paid the same salaries as men? I think it's something fair that we have to look at.
I think in Canada, women make 82 cents on the dollar to a man, and new women to Canada, Aboriginals, minorities, and women with disability, it's even more. I think that, if you look to what was going on at McMaster with the university, I think, again, it's incumbent on organizations to be doing things like pay equity, to be looking at fairness in the system. Because, look, we don't know what all of our male colleagues make but I do think that as an organization, and I know, being in HR, we do have access to that data. I think we have to be bold, and I think we have to challenge and look and ask ourselves, why are those differences existing? And then I think we need to put our money where our mouth is, and when they do exist, I think that they need to be rectified and the gap needs to be closed.
Right here in the middle.
Hi there. I actually worked with Jen on before she moved over to the RAS group when she was in consulting, and you're a great role model for us at PwC. So I wanted to make a quick comment and then ask anybody on the panel a question. My husband is a senior executive at CIBC, and he often feels as a male, they never give him credit for he wants more work-life balance with his children at home. It's always the comment, oh, you know, your wife is gonna be there, and you know, he finds that really unfair. So it's actually interesting that that was brought up, that it's always kind of attributed to the female and not always the male, and you know, we don't probably give them that credit. But I wanted to ask, as senior women at some of these larger firms, we all say that there's things that have been mandated about work-life balance, but at that senior level, are people walking that talk, or is it just there as like nice policies making the firms look good?
So I think when you get, at any point, the organization can only go so far. It's up to you to decide and then enforce your own rules. Like, the organization can be supportive or not supportive, and you certainly want to look for an organization that's supportive. But you know, if you don't want to have emails after 7 o'clock, don't email after 7 o'clock. Like, it's as simple as that. I mean, you're going to get tested. You're going to get tested all the time. But when you break your rule, everyone else says, "Oh, well, you know, for important emails, she'll email me back after 7, and then it becomes moderately important emails, and then suddenly all emails are fair game." And so, I really think it's you absolutely it's both the organization and the individual. You need to look for an organization that's supportive, but then you also need to set and enforce your own rules.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think a lot of it comes down to having some of that self-discipline and knowing, you know, when are your times that you're on, that you are available for work or career-related things, and when those that you're off, and it's either for your individual personal time or for your family, but you're stepping away. And you know, having supportive managers or leaders that really believe in that and understand that is really important, but I think it really needs to start with you and that discipline within yourself, because you can go to, you know, from one organization to the next, but if you don't develop those skills, it will follow you throughout your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that question too, because I think there's trade-offs between work and your family life or the time you want to give back. And I think it's about flexing the two and ensuring that the two don't collide. And sometimes as you want to move up, the ladder, there are additional responsibilities that might cause or start colliding. And I think you have to make those decisions for yourself and the choices. And I can speak for myself that I know that sometimes I didn't put my hand up because my life situation I needed to keep intact and I needed to ground it. And other times, my family situation has moved, or others in the family have taken on roles to help me move forward. So I really do think it's a personal choice as well, and you have to be willing to understand those choices that you might have to make.
And I think you also need to be honest with yourself about when am I putting my foot on the pedal and like going full out in whatever whatever area of business, family, whatever. And more importantly, more importantly, when am I taking my foot off the pedal? You cannot do a full career at 120%. You will die. Like it doesn't work that way. And so you have to have an active conversation with yourself, with your spouse, with your family, with your managers. Maybe not, with your managers, hey, I'm going to be phoning it in for the next couple months. But, like I have 2 small kids. Between my 2 babies, work was, not as much of a focus as it was before, and it is now. You can ask my team sitting up there, they probably were aware of that. And I think you need to be very active about when are you investing, when are you doubling down, can you do your doubling down at the same time that your husband is or your spouse is doubling down, and if so, how, who's going to catch the pieces, and then when are you taking your foot off the gas?
Awesome, right here.
I'd like to refer to the comment you made about the subtler forms of bias that we're seeing in the workplace today at all levels. And you mentioned 2 comments. One is the behaviors that may be happening, and the other is sort of structural or hidden biases. So a lot of times organizations are addressing the structural issues with policies and programs. But what I'd like to hear as senior women in leadership is what are the actions you take, whether it's in a public or private forum, dealing with the subtle behavior issues that are surfacing, the biases that are subtle, not as obvious as they were in former generations?
I guess I'll start with that one. To me, it's about having that dialogue. Even in my reference to a conversation I had yesterday, it was with the leader of one of the areas that I work in the firm, and I wasn't trying to put him on the spot, but it was to say, listen, did you think about it from this perspective, right? Maybe she thinks she is targeting the next level in the conversation I had yesterday, but it's about having that dialogue and kind of making him aware in this case that maybe he was making certain assumptions without being necessarily argumentative, but again, keeping the conversation at the forefront. And so that's really what I try to do, and try to have those conversations. In that case, it was a one-on-one. But certainly, I've brought that similar type conversations up when we're going through all of our staff reviews. And if I see that there's a discrepancy that's developing, I'll pause the meeting and say, listen, I think we need to look at this from a gender lens. I think we need to talk a little bit about this. Maybe we don't intend to be doing X, but I think that's maybe where we're headed. Let's step back and have a conversation about it and think if there's any adjustments that we need. But it's about, I think, continuing to put that conversation first and foremost.
Right at the back.
Thank you so much for your comments today. It's been very insightful. I had a two-part question, one being mentorship and sponsorship. You all spent a lot of time on that, so I want to double-click that a little bit. In that, are your perspectives, is it more of a programmed approach that firms implement, or is it organic? People, Cheryl Sandberg says she believes in organic mentorship and sponsorships and grooming those relationships as opposed to, a program basis. So that's my first question. And then the second one being, sounds like sponsors is very important. So how does one have 10 sponsors? Is one person have one sponsor? And how do you identify it? And is it you who identifies them and seeks them out? Sorry for the multiple questions.
I'll take the first part. You know what, I think it's both. I think that there's, it's not to your detriment if there's a program at an organization that has mentor and sponsorship, but I also agree with what, we said earlier, is that you gotta kind of step out there, and if your organization doesn't have a mentor program or a champions program, go and find one. So I don't think you can just sit and wait. I do think you have to put the initiative out there. I don't know if there's a magic number per se, but at least for myself, whenever I've had a mentor or a champion, it's someone that I knew I could learn from, somebody that would make me better, that would stretch me, that would push me, and it was somebody that would be in a position, hopefully one day to be able to advocate about what my strengths were. And when programs didn't exist, I went and sought them out. The worst thing someone can say to you is no.
And that's never happened.
And it never happens because people want to help. So I think sometimes that voice in our head makes us worried about the no. I've never had anyone say no to me.
I think in terms of sponsors, you want multiple sponsors. I mean, there may be primary and secondary depending on what's going on in your life. I recently heard Annette Verschuren, who used to be head of Home Depot in Canada and is like an incredibly inspirational woman, talk about her, how she's managed her career, and she has dozens of sponsors, and she sort of collected them and she keeps them, and they play different roles depending on what's next for her in their career, whether she's transitioning from one business to another, or what she needs to learn at that particular moment. But she's got a real collection of them. I think that is very aspirational. I think that's great. It takes a lot of work, right? It's about maintaining a relationship and making sure that they are seeing value in it. But I think, long term, as you build your career, having multiples of these people around you who are willing to invest in you and are willing to put their equity down on your behalf is incredibly helpful.
We just have.
I was just going to add 2 practical tips on that, though. I think what makes for an effective mentorship or sponsorship is the right chemistry. And so you need to make sure you have that chemistry. You may find it through a program that the organization provides, or it may be from you going out one-on-one. And the other thing is to make sure that you have a sense of how the organization works, because that'll give you a clue as to who the influencers are that can then help you in terms of a sponsorship or championship role. And then the number, I don't think, is as important as understanding the politics that are in play there.
And we just have time for one more question. Feel free to stand up and just take over the room.
Say that Canadian College of Health Leaders has a very Thank you to you, and thank you to the ladies on the panel. The discussions have been great this afternoon. At the beginning of our discussion, there was a lot of talk about the fact that we're still kind of stuck. We're at a point where we're stuck when it comes to women's advancement in the corporate environment. And I'd be curious to know as to why we are stuck at this time. We've got more women than ever who are graduating from universities. We've got amazing educational backgrounds. We talk about our leadership style as being the style that we want in the corporate environment. So what's happened to create this situation of being stuck, and what do we as women need to do to change, and what does the corporate environment need to do to change so that we can move the dial?
It's a small question.
Here's a shorter one. What's the meaning of life?
I mean, I take a stab at it. I think that a lot of the low-hanging fruit we've sort of addressed in some cases. The problem now is highly complex, and it's a huge problem. I mean, we've been touching on some of the elements. I think the solutions are a combination of organizational, regulatory, and personal in terms of how we're engaging, but it is an incredibly complex problem, and I think that's why you've got organizations and women across business and focused on it, because there isn't a single solution to this. This is going to take a while to get ourselves unstuck.
Yeah. Thank you. No, thank you very much to all of you. Your honesty and sharing both professional and personal situations and advice is incredible. And I can just tell how much people in the audience value it. So thank you very much. A big hand.
Thank you.
For all of our panelists. Thank you. Do you need anybody help getting